What is up, Math Superstars? In this edition of Mr. Peterson Presents, I'm bringing to you Objective 6.18. We're talking about one-step equations, and with this video, we're going to focus on what we do with multiplication and division in one step. So we have to remember some few things before we get started. The goal of solving equations is finding out what the variable is going to equal. So we're going to, at the end, we're going to figure out what our variable equals. All we need to do, just like we did in addition and subtraction, we need to isolate. So this word isolate means we're going to figure out what A equals. So there would be something with A, we need to isolate or get A or the variable by itself, and we use something called inverse operations. So that's a really fancy term for figuring out what the opposite operation that we need to do. So for our first one here, so we have to, if we're going to add 23, the inverse of adding 23 would be subtracting 23. So our next step, if we're going to talk about subtracting 18, the inverse would be adding 18. So if we're multiplying by 15, you guessed it, the inverse is dividing by 15. And last but not least, if we divide by 8, the inverse, or the opposite, means we're just going to multiply by 8. So now here we're given example number 1. It says solve for 8 times x equals 56. So we know that if there's no operation in between those, the number and the variable, we know that we're multiplying. So our very first step is we need to identify where the variable is. So we identify the variables on the left-hand side of the equation. So good, just what I do on the screen, you're going to follow along on your notes. So we need to figure out what's done to this variable on the left side. So we know that we are multiplying this variable. We're multiplying by 8. And so in a way, how we undo this is we divide both sides by 8. So here's the way that this is going to look. So here we're given 8x, 8 times x equals 56. So we notice that we have 2 bars here. So what this means is we are going to divide both sides by 8. So when we do this, when we divide both sides by 8, let's look at the left-hand side of the equation first. So if we do 8 divided by 8 on the left-hand side of the equation, we know that's going to be equal to 1. So these two numbers will cancel out to 1, leaving us just with x by itself, because that was our goal, to get x by itself. So now let's go ahead and focus on the right-hand side of our equation here. So we have 56 divided by 8. So 56 divided by 8 gives us an answer of 7. So right here is the steps we did. We identified the variable. We figured out what's being done to the variable is multiply by 8. So the opposite, which is talking about undoing the multiplication, is dividing by 8. And then we're applying that to both sides of our equation to give us x equal to 7. And you guessed it, as always, we're going to have to check our work here. So in our check, we have x equal to 7. So we're going to write down our original equation. So when you do your classwork, we're looking for these steps right here in the box that you need to be able to do. So we're going to write down the original equation. We're going to substitute for the variable. So wherever x is, x now is going to be 7. So let's perform 8 times 7. So 8 times 7, using our math facts, is 56. And just like that, we can check that off knowing that 56 is equal to 56. We need to figure out, is this true? So you need to be able to check your own work to make sure that you perform this one-step equation properly. So now we have example number 2. So example number 2 says solve for a divided by 5 is equal to 12. So we got to identify where our variable is. We know that our variable is in the numerator here on the left-hand side. what's being done to this variable? It is dividing by 5. So the step to undo all of this is we are multiplying by 5. And so let's go ahead and apply this to both sides of our equation here. So let's go ahead. Now we're going to multiply both sides by 5. And let's focus in on the left-hand side of the equation first. So we need to multiply 5 times a over 5. So what we need to do is we need to make 5 into a fraction, 5 over 1. What we know that if we can cross simplify. So 5 divided by 5 divided by 5. We know that these can cross simplify to 1, leaving us just with a by itself on the left-hand side. And so now we need to do what's on the right-hand side. We have 12 times 5. So math facts. So we can count by 12s. 12, 24, 36, 48, and 48 plus 12 gives us 60. So what we did is on the left-hand side, we got a by itself. So we undid the division with multiplication. And then whatever we do on the left side, we have to do on the right side. 12 times 5 gives us 60. So you guessed it. Now we have to check our work here. So we said a was equal to 60. So what we did was we rewrote our original equation. We're going to substitute a. So our value for a was 60. And then we can do 60 divided by 5. So if we do some long division here, 60 divided by 5, 5 goes into 6 one time, bring down our 5. So 6 minus 5 is 1, bring down our 0, 5 divided by 10 is 2. So we have to figure out this 12 equal 12, and that checks out. So we did example number 2 properly. So now for your classwork, what we're looking at for you to do is to follow the steps in examples 1 and 2 to do your classwork. So our last little part here for one-step equations, and when we talk about multiplying and dividing, sometimes the coefficient will be a fraction. And so with that being said, we need to use the multiplicative inverse or the reciprocals. Very simply, what we do is we need to multiply by flipping our fraction here. So what we're doing, just a little practice on reciprocals here. So we need to find the reciprocal of 1/3. We can say that when we flip it is 3 over 1. So when we find the reciprocal of 5/7, when we flip it is 7 over 5. And let's go ahead and flip our last one 2/5. When we flip that is 5 over 2. So this is useful information for when we have problems like the following here. So we're given this problem. We need to solve 3/5 times t equals 6. So we know that. We're going to identify some information here. Our coefficient of t is 3/5. The reciprocal of 3/5 is 5 over 3. So that is what we're going to multiply both sides of our equation by. So here here's the way it's going to look. So we're going to multiply each side by the multiplicative inverse. So let's go to multiply both sides by 5 over 3. So what this does, let's focus on the left side of our equation first. We're just getting t by itself. And we've done that because when we cross simplify, if we focus on 5 and 5, we can cross simplify those to 1. And the 3 and the 3, they cross simplify to 1. So we're just left with t on the left-hand side. And now we need to multiply 6 by 5/3. And so let's go ahead and put 6 over 1 times 5 over 3. So we could cross simplify first. So we can simplify 6 and 3. So if we divide both of those by 3, we're left with 1 and 2. So let's go to multiply our numerators. 2 times 5 is 10. And then 1 times 1 is 1. So when we simplify that, t is equal to 10. If you did not cross simplify, say if you didn't, and you went 6 over 1 times 5 over 3, it can come out to 30 over 3. Then you say, how many times does 3 go into 30? That's a grand total of 10 times. So you can say that t would be equal to 10. And then we could go ahead and, in your notes, there's no place to check, but we always want to just double check to make sure here. So let's go ahead. We have our original equation here, 3 over 5 times t is equal to 6. Let's go ahead and fill in 10 for t. So it would be 3 over 5 times 10, I'll just put it 10 over 1, is equal to 6. So let's go ahead and solve what's on the left-hand side. We just need to make sure that this equals 6. So if I multiply 3 times 10 is 30, 5 times 1 is 5. We can say, how many times does 5 go into 30? That equals 6. So our check works out here. So we just got to remember, whenever there's a fraction as our coefficient, we're going to make sure that we're going to multiply both sides by the reciprocal. So now let's go ahead and using these steps, let's go ahead and solve example number 2 here. So we have 2/7 times t is equal to 8. So we know that our coefficient is 2/7. Let's go and find the reciprocal first. So the reciprocal of 2/7 is 7 over 2. So now what we're going to do here, we have 2/7 times t is equal to 8. We're going to multiply both sides by our reciprocal. So we're going to multiply by 7 over 2 times 7 over 2. So now let's do everything on the left-hand side of our equation first. So we know that 7 over 2 times 2 over 7 just comes out to 1. So we're going to bring t down. Let's go bring down our equal sign. And then we have to figure out what 8 times 7 halves is. So let's go ahead and put 8 over 1 times 7 over 2. We could cross simplify. Let's go and cross simplify 8 and 4. We know that's dividing by 2. So that 2 divided by 2 is 1. 8 divided by 2 is 4. And then we just multiply our numerators. 4 times 7 gives us 28. And 1 times 1 is 1. So our simplified answer, t, would be equal to 28. And we always want to make sure that we check. So let's go ahead and rewrite our original equation here. So we have 2/7 t is equal to 8. We're going to substitute t in for 28. So when we do that, 2/7 times 28, and I'll put it over 1 to multiply it easier, would be equal to 8. So let's focus here on the left-hand side of our equation. So we can cross simplify 7 and 28. So 7 divided by 7 is 1. 28 divided by 7 is 4. And then we do 2 times 4 is 8 over 1. So 8 over 1, we simplify that to 8. So our answers match up, which means we did the check properly. So we know this takes a couple of extra steps, but please refer back to your notes. Your very first step, to recap, is you're going to use the reciprocal. Find the reciprocal of that coefficient first, and then you're going to multiply by that reciprocal.